Officer Nathan Carter was just finishing a quiet patrol through the misty forest roads of Ironvale when Atlas, his aging German Shepherd partner, suddenly growled and bolted into the trees. What they found lying broken by the roadside would unravel everything. A woman in torn FBI gear, bloodied and barely breathing, whispered a name before falling unconscious. A name tied to a case the department had buried years ago. As Nathan lifted her into his arms, the first snow of the season began to fall, and with it, a trail of secrets would thaw. Who had betrayed Agent Mara Hayes? What was she running from? And why did Atlas, a dog once left for dead, seem to know exactly where to go, like he'd been waiting all his life for this moment? What happens next will break your heart and restore your faith in miracles. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. Let's see how far Atlas's story can travel. The winter night fell heavily over the forests outside Ironvale, Oregon, a small town pressed between the mountains and the misty pines. A storm had passed hours earlier, but its remnants lingered. Sheets of icy drizzle tapping against the windshield, snow slush at the shoulders of the road, and the hollow hush of wind winding through dark branches. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, and the kind of silence that carried both beauty and danger. Inside a marked patrol SUV, the dashboard glowed faint amber. Officer Nathan Cole, 37, leaned forward, his hands steady on the wheel. Nathan had the quiet bearing of a man who had learned not to rush his words or gestures. His square jaw was softened by a faint stubble, and his gray-blue eyes carried a weight that came from too many midnight shifts and too many calls that ended with tragedy. His frame was lean but strong, broad shoulders wrapped in a dark navy patrol jacket. Though respected in Ironvale for his integrity, he was known to be reserved, rarely smiling except when with his partner. That partner sat beside him, Atlas, a 10-year-old German Shepherd K9’s. Atlas had sable fur streaked with silver, one ear bent from an old injury, and a scar tracing along his right hind leg. Age had stiffened his joints, but his eyes, deep brown, steady, intelligent, remained sharp as ever. Atlas had once served in high-risk narcotics raids and carried himself with the calm vigilance of a veteran. In Ironvale, townsfolk said the dog seemed to sense storms before they came. Nathan trusted Atlas more than he trusted most people. The bond between man and dog was unspoken, but absolute. Nathan adjusted the heater dial. "Quiet night," he murmured. Atlas gave a soft chuff, resting his muzzle on the console, though his ears twitched at every gust outside. The road twisted deeper into the forest, where the patrol lights barely pierced the shadows. That was when Atlas stirred, suddenly, ears pricked, nose twitching toward the side window. His body stiffened, and a low growl rolled from his throat. Nathan slowed the vehicle. "What is it, boy?" The beam of headlights swept across a shape crumpled in the snow by the roadside. For a moment, Nathan thought it was debris. A pile of fabric thrown from a truck, but then the figure moved, an arm twitching weakly. He pulled over sharply, tires crunching on slush. "Stay sharp," he told Atlas. Nathan stepped out, boots sinking into half-frozen ground. The cold bit at his face. He approached cautiously, flashlight cutting a narrow cone through the darkness. The figure was a woman, mid-30s, her dark auburn hair plastered to her face with snowmelt. Her clothes were torn, once a dark suit jacket and slacks, now ripped and stained with blood along her side. She tried to raise herself but collapsed again, groaning. Nathan knelt beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her lips were cracked, her breath ragged, eyes flickering open. They were a striking green, even dulled by exhaustion. Don't call local dispatch," she whispered hoarsely. Nathan frowned. "You need a hospital." "I know," she rasped. "But listen, my name is Mara Quinn, FBI, field agent. I was on pursuit, ambushed." Her words broke with coughs. "They call themselves Sanctum. They knew where I'd be. That means someone in law enforcement is feeding them." Nathan froze. Mara Quinn, he had heard the name once in briefing files, attached to an interstate task force. Up close, she looked both fierce and fragile. Tall, but gaunt from weeks of work without rest, her cheekbone marked by a fading bruise older than tonight. There was a steadiness to her gaze despite the weakness, like someone trained to stare down threats and never blink. But tonight, she was hunted prey. "You're bleeding badly," Nathan said, pressing his jacket to her wound. "We'll get you out of here." She shook her head faintly. "They're still out here. They don't leave witnesses." Before Nathan could respond, Atlas suddenly sprang to attention. He darted forward a few paces, nose to the ground, then stopped stiffly, tail high, growl deepening. His bark shattered the silence, sharp, insistent. Nathan's instincts kicked in. He drew his service pistol and scanned the trees. Snowflakes drifted like ash against the beam of his flashlight. For a split second, he caught movement shadows slipping behind trunks. Someone was watching them. "Show yourself!" Nathan barked, weapon steady, no answer. Atlas barked again, lunging toward the tree line but stopping short, trained never to break formation without command. His eyes burned into the darkness, teeth bared. Then came the sound. A branch snapping. Nathan fired a single warning shot into the ground near the movement. The report echoed through the forest. Whoever lingered in the trees fled, footsteps crunching quickly away until the silence returned. Nathan lowered his weapon slowly, heart pounding. Atlas remained bristled, watching, but when the sound faded, he returned to Mara's side, nosing her gently as though to assure her. "You weren't wrong," Nathan muttered. "They're here." Mara coughed again, pain seizing her ribs. "You have to understand. Sanctum doesn't fear badges. They own people. Your station," she gasped. "Not everyone is clean." Nathan studied her, the weight of her words heavy. Betrayal inside the badge was the worst wound of all. A rustle came from farther back along the road. Nathan swung around, ready, but this time the figure stepping from the shadows was hunched, shivering. Not a threat. An old man, wrapped in layers of torn coats, his beard matted with frost, his hands empty except for a dented coffee tin. The man froze at the sight of Nathan's weapon. "Don't shoot, officer," he croaked, voice raspy. "I ain't done nothing. I saw them. Men with rifles, black trucks. Thought the woods swallowed me, but I kept walking." Nathan recognized him faintly. Earl Hensley, a local drifter who drifted between shelters and backwoods shacks. Earl was tall, but stooped, late 60s, with eyes that had seen too many winters alone. His mind was frayed by years of hardship, but he noticed things most ignored. "You saw them tonight?" Nathan asked. Earl nodded vigorously, teeth chattering. "Yes, sir, down the ridge. Thought I was next. Then I heard that dog barking and I knew someone else was cornered." His gaze softened at Atlas. "Fine animal you got there. Saved you, didn't he?" Nathan exhaled. "More times than I can count." Earl shuffled back. "Don't mind me. I'll be gone before sunup." He slipped into the shadows again, leaving only the faint rattle of his tin. Nathan returned to Mara. Her pulse was faint, but steady. "We're moving you," he said firmly. "Hospital, no arguments. Atlas will watch our backs." Mara tried to protest, but her strength gave out. Nathan lifted her carefully into his arms lighter than he expected, as if worn thin by weeks of running. Atlas circled protectively, scanning the tree line with sharp eyes. As Nathan laid her gently into the back of the SUV, Atlas hopped in beside her, settling with his body pressed close, warmth radiating into her shivering frame. Mara's hand brushed against the dog's fur, almost in gratitude, before her eyes slid shut. Nathan started the engine. Snow fell thicker now, blurring the forest road ahead. In the rearview mirror, Atlas's eyes glowed amber in the dim light, never leaving Mara's face. The hunt had only just begun. The rain had turned to a light sleet by the time Nathan guided the cruiser through the winding back roads toward the nearest hospital in Ashwood, a quiet mountain town nestled along the edge of Washington's Timberline Ridge. The wipers squeaked against the windshield, blurring the halos of the few street lamps that flickered through the mist. In the passenger seat, Special Agent Mara Quinn lay slumped, wrapped in a thermal blanket, her pallor ghostly beneath the dashboard glow. Atlas, the 10-year-old sable German shepherd with silver streaks in his coat and a bent left ear, sat alert in the back, eyes trained on her every breath. Mara was 32, lean and angular, with sharp cheekbones and dark auburn hair now matted to her bloodied forehead. Her features, even in pain, held the hardened grace of someone who'd spent her life on the edge of danger. She was known within the Bureau as a tenacious investigator, fiercely independent, often too blunt for politics. Her latest assignment, tracking illegal arms through a smuggling syndicate known as Sanctum, had brought her to the town under cover, but now the cover was gone. At Ashwood Medical, Dr. Jensen, a barrel-chested man with calloused hands and kind eyes, quickly assessed Mara's injuries. 2 cracked ribs, a gash above her brow, and bruises along her torso suggested she had been beaten, not just ambushed. As nurses wheeled her away, Nathan lingered in the hallway, Atlas sitting quietly by his side, tail tapping the floor every few seconds. Nathan couldn't shake the tension knotting between his shoulders. Sanctum wasn't just a name now. It was blood on asphalt, betrayal inside the system. An hour later, in a curtained-off recovery room smelling faintly of antiseptic and lavender oil, Mara sat propped up with a bandaged head and whispered voice. "They used the Sawyer lumber mill as a front. I was trailing one of their couriers. Then, ambushed. I heard someone use a radio code phrases. I recognized one. It came from inside your department." Her gaze was glassy but sharp. "There's a mole, Officer Cole." Nathan's expression darkened. The Sawyer mill had been closed for 5 years after a fire, but rumors had always swirled about strange activity there, no proof, only whispers and missing persons. "And the money?" he asked, handing her a sealed evidence bag with a folded $20 bill pulled from her inner coat pocket. She frowned. "That wasn't mine." Atlas, still by the door, perked up. He stepped forward, nose twitching, and let out a low growl. Not aggressive, but focused. He nosed the plastic, then looked up at Nathan with those alert, intelligent eyes. Nathan leaned closer and sniffed. Faint, but distinct acetone, oil, and something bitterly metallic. Chemicals. "That scent," Mara murmured. "It's used in processing polymer-based explosives. Sanctum's smuggled everything from guns to unregistered labs." Nathan's jaw clenched. This wasn't just a rogue case anymore, it was layered. His instincts, honed by a decade on the force, told him the time for paperwork was over. He needed to move before more shadows covered the truth. After ensuring Mara would be watched over by hospital security, Nathan and Atlas made a quiet stop at Mildred's Diner, a small family-run place on the outskirts of town. The painted sign creaked in the cold wind, and the parking lot sat mostly empty under the pale neon open sign. Mildred Greeley was a woman in her late 60s, with wiry gray hair pulled into a bun and a perpetual scowl that didn't match her generous portions. She had been a widow for 2 decades, ever since her husband, a logger, disappeared near the old mill. Life had chiseled lines into her tall, slender frame, but beneath that weathered face lay a memory sharp as a tack. Nathan and Atlas took their usual booth, but tonight he wasn't alone. Mara sat across from him, stiffly, clutching a mug of black coffee between her bandaged hands. Her eyes scanned the diner out of habit, cataloging exits and unfamiliar faces. "Well, well," Mildred muttered, setting down a plate of steaming shepherd's pie. "You've brought company, Officer Cole, and she's got that haunted look. You watch out haunted women either burn down your heart or your house." Mara smirked faintly. While Nathan made small talk, Atlas wandered toward Mildred's end of the counter and nudged her knee with his muzzle. The old woman paused. The dog's gentle gaze held hers, and he slowly placed his head on her lap. Something in that gesture cracked her guarded exterior. She reached down and scratched behind his ears. "My Frank had a dog just like you," she whispered. "Same eyes, smart as sin." After a beat of silence, she stood, went behind the counter and returned with something wrapped in wax paper, an old fragment of a logging map. "I wasn't going to show this to anyone," she said, "but you bring that dog around, and suddenly I remember why I kept it." The map was faded, stained with oil and torn along the creases, but a red X was marked behind the Sawyer mill, near what looked like an access road. "Few years back," she said, "boys from the mill started disappearing. Not quitting, not moving, just gone. I asked around, and one night a man gave me this in a brown envelope, said I'd understand when the time came. Then he vanished." Mara leaned forward. "Do you remember what he looked like?" "Tall, thin, eyes like winter frost. Wore a flannel coat 2 sizes too big. Called himself Harold. That's all I know." Nathan folded the map gently and slid it into his jacket. "We'll check it out," he said, rising. "You've helped more than you know." As they left the diner, Atlas let out a soft chuff, his gaze fixed toward the direction of the mill. Dark and unseen beyond the trees. Something waited there. The sun had long sunk behind the western ridge, leaving Clearwater County bathed in the kind of darkness that swallowed even the bravest whispers. Nathan Cole parked his cruiser a good distance from the Sawyer sawmill, not because he feared being seen, but because the place deserved respect. Abandoned for nearly a decade, the sawmill sat like a carcass of a forgotten time, but Nathan knew better. Nothing that quiet was ever truly dead. Beside him, Atlas leapt down from the passenger seat. The 10-year-old German shepherd moved with a limping grace. His hind leg still bore a faint scar from an old bullet wound, but there was fire in his stride. His sable coat rippled like smoke in the moonlight, and his one bent ear twitched toward every rustle in the undergrowth. Nathan clicked off the headlights, reached into the glove box, and retrieved a worn flashlight, wrapping it in cloth to dull the glow. "Stay close," he murmured. Atlas responded with a quiet whine, already alert, already listening. The path to the mill was overgrown. Pine needles blanketed the trail, muffling their footsteps. The closer they got, the colder the air became, as if the ground itself held its breath. The sawmill loomed ahead, its roof rusted, wood warped, windows shattered. But beneath the decay was movement. A faint flicker of yellow light seeped through a broken slat near the foundation. Someone was inside. They circled wide. Nathan used an old drainage ditch to crawl beneath the structure, lifting a rotten panel with his knife. The scent inside was pungent sawdust, oil, mold, and something metallic. Blood, maybe. Atlas ducked in after him, nose low, ears forward. The interior was a cathedral of ruin. Conveyor belts hung limp. Chains rusted in place. And yet, in the center of it all, someone had cleared a path to a wall where newer wood covered a vertical seam. Atlas padded toward it, sniffed once, twice, then let out a sharp bark. Nathan joined him, feeling along the boards. A hollow knock. He pried it loose with a crowbar. Inside was a false compartment, barely big enough to hold a small box. Inside that, a black USB drive and a weathered spiral notebook. The cover was water-stained, but inside the handwriting was precise. Pages filled with shipping logs, routes through the county's backroads, symbols Nathan didn't yet understand, except one. A recurring S with a broken halo above it, the mark of sanctum. But before he could flip another page, a sharp creak above them made him freeze. Footsteps. Not one set. 3. Atlas growled low. Nathan backed into the shadows, drawing his pistol. Through the gaps in the wallboards, he saw them 3 men in dark tactical clothing, masks obscuring their faces. One had a shotgun slung low, another carried a long blade. "They found it," one muttered. "Wade said if we catch anyone sniffing, we bury him under the damn foundation." Nathan raised his gun. "Don't move." The moment froze, then exploded. Atlas lunged, straight into the chest of the blade wielder, knocking him off his feet. The man screamed, slashing wildly. Nathan fired toward the ceiling light, shattering it. The sawmill plunged into chaos. Another gun fired blind. Wood splintered above Nathan's head. "Atlas, back!" he shouted. Grabbing the notebook and USB, he ran low, weaving through fallen beams and broken equipment. Atlas followed, blood on his muzzle, eyes wild but focused. They reached a side stairwell, half collapsed but passable. Nathan kicked the rusted door open. The cold night air rushed in like salvation. They burst out the back, disappearing into the woods before the attackers regrouped. They didn't stop running until the trees swallowed them whole. Half a mile away, hidden behind an overgrown loading dock, Nathan collapsed to his knees, panting hard. "You good, boy?" Atlas gave a soft huff, then leaned against Nathan's shoulder, pressing his weight into him like a promise. Far above, in the rafters of the sawmill, another set of eyes had watched everything. Eli. 14. Gaunt, with tangled brown hair and a thin frame, Eli wore oversized overalls and a flannel shirt 2 sizes too big. His boots were held together with duct tape. He'd been sleeping in the attic of the sawmill for weeks, ever since his uncle, a failed meth cook with debts to the wrong men, disappeared. The Sanctum enforcers had forced Eli to stay, feeding him just enough, making him clean up their messes, burn papers, carry crates. He had thought there was no escape. But he'd seen something tonight. Not just a gunfight, but a dog. Brave, unyielding, fighting back, defending someone. And in that moment, watching Atlas take down a masked man without hesitation, something shifted in Eli. A stubborn spark rekindled deep inside. Maybe he wasn't completely forgotten. Maybe he could run. Maybe he could find someone who would fight for him too. He slid deeper into the shadows of the attic, quietly packing his few belongings. There were still men below, but soon, when the time was right, he would leave. A fresh layer of snow blanketed the streets of Ravenbrook that morning, its quiet beauty doing little to soothe Nathan Cole's churning thoughts. The sky remained a pale, leaden gray, hinting at more snow to come, while the wind whispered low against the windows of the old precinct. Mara Quinn stood by the window of the temporary safe house, a modest apartment above the town's forgotten bookstore. She had changed into borrowed clothes, a navy sweatshirt and gray sweatpants, making her look far less like an elite FBI agent and more like a tired woman who'd seen too much. Her posture was straighter now, her bruises fading, but a storm still simmered beneath her pale blue eyes. "You're sure this USB came from that hollow beam in the mill?" Nathan nodded, seated across from her at the kitchen table with his German shepherd Atlas, resting loyally at his side. Atlas found it. Smelled something off about the place. Nathan pulled the laptop closer, the screen glowing with a frozen frame from the USB's contents rows upon rows of ID cards. Each face frozen in time. Dozens of them. Some smiling awkwardly, others plainly scared even in a staged photo. All of the cards bore the same small red symbol in the corner, a Sanctum rune. Mara's hand covered her mouth. "These aren't just fakes. They're real IDs taken from real people. This is a trafficking network." She scrolled through the folder, stopping at one card in particular. Oh, God. This girl. She was part of a witness protection program. I remember the name. She vanished last year during transport. We thought it was an unrelated attack. Nathan leaned forward. "So, this isn't just Sanctum hiding behind a mill. They've infiltrated witness systems, maybe law enforcement. We don't know how far it goes." Atlas gave a low whine and stood, pacing toward the door, then back to Nathan, tail stiff. Mara noticed. "He does that when something's wrong?" "He knows when something's off," Nathan said, "even before I do." Just then, a soft ping came from Nathan's phone, a message from dispatch. "Possible stalking incident reported near Community Center. Victim's name, Grace Cole." His breath caught. "My sister." Mara sat up straighter. "She's the school counselor, right? At the youth outreach program?" "Yeah," Nathan said, grabbing his coat. "She works mostly with at-risk teens, some from the same neighborhoods where Sanctum's been active." Atlas was already at the door, ears up, hackles slightly raised. Nathan clipped on the leash, but the dog barely needed it. He was focused now, sharp, like a thread had pulled taut, and he could feel it vibrating. Outside, the streets of Ravenbrook were strangely quiet despite the hour. Snowmelt dripped from eaves and the sky above was growing darker, promising more storms. As they passed the town square, Nathan's thoughts turned grim. Grace had always been the light in their family, the one who smiled through grief and taught others how to survive their own. After their parents' death, she'd practically raised Nathan through high school, and now she was the only family he had left. Grace Cole, 35, was tall and lean, with honey blonde hair usually tied in a low ponytail, and an unshakable optimism that made her popular with students and maddeningly calm in crises. She dressed simply, fleece coats, sensible boots, soft scarves, but there was a dignity to her that couldn't be overlooked. When they reached the community center, Grace stood near the entrance speaking with Officer Darrell Monroe, a younger cop with a heavy brow and uncertain posture. "It was probably nothing," Grace was saying, "but I saw someone standing by the fence yesterday, and again this morning, just watching." Nathan approached. "Grace, you okay?" She turned and offered a small smile. "I'm fine. I just had this feeling. Someone was waiting for something, or someone." Atlas suddenly pulled free and darted toward a narrow alley behind the center. Nathan followed instantly. In the alley, Atlas was circling a stack of discarded crates, nose low, tail stiff. Then he barked sharply. Nathan stepped forward and spotted it. Hidden beneath a damp rag was a small wooden box. He opened it carefully. Inside, dozens of laminated ID cards, the same as those from the USB. Some bore the names of teens Grace had once worked with. Others had red ink stains that matched the faint pattern on Mara's blood-stained bill. More damning still, in the box's false bottom, lay stamped documents orders, authorizations, signatures from local enforcement offices. Nathan's gut turned. Later that evening, back at the safe house, Mara analyzed the IDs again. "They're collecting them like trophies, or using them to falsify new identities." "But why dump some here?" Nathan asked. "Maybe someone panicked," Mara replied. "Or maybe they're taunting us." Atlas let out a small huff, then walked over to Grace. Was who had joined them after the report. She sat beside him, running her hand gently along his back. "He knew where to look," she murmured. "He's not just trained. He feels things." "That dog saved my life," Mara said, "and now he might be saving others." Nathan watched Atlas rest his head on Grace's lap, the tension in the room dissolving slightly, but his phone buzzed again. An anonymous message. "You're getting too close. Back off or your sister won't be so lucky next time." No signature, no name, but Nathan knew what it meant. He stood and looked to Mara. "It's not just about uncovering them anymore. They know who we are." She met his eyes. "Then we don't flinch. We fight smarter." Nathan turned to Atlas, who was already alert, ears up. "You ready, boy?" Atlas gave a low, approving bark. This wasn't just personal now, it was war. The morning after their discovery in the storage shed was heavy with a grim stillness. Nathan stood on the porch of the small house they had retreated to, an old ranger outpost that hadn't seen service in years, sifting through the photos and documents from the USB. The IDs, names, and dates all seemed normal at first glance, until one by one he began to recognize patterns: missing persons with no formal reports, duplicated surnames shuffled between counties, and falsified death certificates issued by departments within their own region. Mara sat at a splintered table nearby, her fingers curled tightly around a chipped ceramic mug. Her recovery had been steady, but the weight of the evidence seemed to drag her backwards into a pain she had worked hard to suppress. She was in her late 20s, slender, with long dark hair pulled into a tired braid, and her brown eyes were clouded by grief, both from her own ordeal and the hundreds now connected to it. Atlas, the 10-year-old German shepherd with sable and silver fur, rested near the doorway, his bent left ear twitching now and then, but suddenly he rose, tail stiff, nose flaring. A low growl vibrated in his chest. Nathan followed the dog's gaze and reached for his sidearm. They stepped outside just in time to see a figure step back toward the woods. Deputy Thomas Briggs. Briggs, a man in his early 40s with a bulky frame and a receding hairline, had been Nathan's partner for 3 years before he requested reassignment to the Rural Patrol Division. He always came off as gruff but dependable. His pale blue eyes had a perpetual squint, and he spoke in short, sharp sentences like every word cost him effort. But now he looked startled, nervous, avoiding Nathan's eyes. A sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead despite the cool air. "Briggs," Nathan called, voice firm. "What brings you out here?" Briggs hesitated, adjusting the strap of his patrol bag. "I heard you were working off the books. Figured I'd lend a hand." Atlas stepped forward, placing himself squarely between the men and Briggs. His hackles rose. A bark shattered the silence, sharp and accusatory. "I don't think he wants you here," Mara said quietly, her gaze sharp. Briggs took a step back, but in doing so, a small black card slipped from his coat pocket, fluttering to the dirt. Nathan bent down. It was a magnetic key card with a matte surface on it. Embossed faintly in silver was a raven silhouette, its wings spread wide. The symbol of Sanctum. Nathan straightened slowly, locking eyes with his former partner. "You've been feeding them information." Briggs' lips twitched, his jaw clenched, and in a flash he turned to run. Atlas lunged, catching him by the arm and yanking him backward with controlled force. Nathan rushed forward, grabbing Briggs and forcing him to the ground. "Why?" Nathan hissed, holding him down. Briggs struggled beneath him, gasping. "You don't understand, they said they'd kill my boy." "Your son?" Mara asked, stunned. Briggs nodded, voice cracking. "He's just a teenager. They got him hooked on something. Threatened to make him vanish if I didn't. Keep them ahead of you. I never knew the full extent. Just names, patrol routes. That's all I gave." Atlas stepped back, watching Briggs with wary eyes. As Nathan processed the confession, another voice interrupted, gravelly, hesitant. "I've seen him." They all turned to see a figure emerging from behind a tree, a homeless man with a wild gray beard, frayed overcoat, and a pair of boots that barely clung to his feet. His name was Jasper, a quiet wanderer known to many in town, but remembered by none. His left eye was clouded from an old injury, and his frame was bent from years of hardship. Jasper looked straight at Nathan. "Saw this one." He jabbed a thumb toward Briggs. "Meeting men in black coats near the old dam road. Always late at night, they gave him envelopes. Thick ones." Nathan's chest tightened. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Jasper looked down. "When you live invisible, you learn to stay that way." Nathan offered a slow nod of understanding. "You won't be invisible anymore, I promise." Briggs remained silent, his gaze hollow. Mara sat beside Atlas, absently stroking his fur. Later, in the small ranger office, Nathan opened the drawers of the old radio cabinet and found an emergency database terminal still functional. He inserted the key card. A green light blinked to life. Dozens of encrypted folders appeared, shipment logs, route schedules, personnel rosters. Briggs had access to everything. Among the files was a list of code names and ranks within Sanctum's network. One entry stood out: Corvus, Handler. Nathan recognized the location tied to the Entry Graces Community Center. His sister was being watched. He stared at the screen, heart racing, but face unreadable. Atlas sat beside him, his weight steady and calming. The pieces were coming together too fast to stop now. The rain had turned to mist by the time Nathan, Mara, and Atlas reached the old ranger station deep within Black Hollow Preserve. The wind stirred the moss-laden pines and the trees groaned with the weight of secrets. Mara, her injuries mostly healed, kept close to Nathan's side, her eyes scanning the trail with cautious resolve. Her once pale face now bore a calm strength, but grief still lingered in the corners of her eyes. The keycard, black, with the faint outline of a crow, clicked silently against the lock embedded in the rusted metal door. The station had long been abandoned, its paint peeling, windows boarded, and signage half buried beneath ivy and time. But when Nathan pressed the card to the reader, a green light blinked. The door slid open, What met them inside was not cobwebs or rotted lumber. It was industrial order. Beneath flickering ceiling lights stood metal crates marked with coded labels, oxygen canisters, and chain restraints. In the far corner, a windowless cargo van idled silently, its rear doors open, revealing narrow bunks and IV lines. A map was pinned to a corkboard, its route traced with red ink stretching toward the Canadian border. Hidden in plain sight, the ranger station was no longer shelter, but a gateway. A waypoint for bodies smuggled like cargo and drugs ferried with ghostly precision. Mara walked forward stiffly, her gloved hand trembling as it hovered over a bundle of clothing discarded in a bin. A child's sweater pink, with a unicorn decal, her throat clenched. "This is where they keep them before transport," she said hollowly. Atlas padded ahead, ears perked, his nose twitching. His sable coat caught the dim light, and despite the healing gash along his flank from the Sung Kua ambush, he moved with silent urgency. He paused at a floor panel and growled low. Nathan knelt, prying it open. Beneath the hatch was a metal trapdoor and a corridor descending underground. Before they could descend, headlights blazed outside. "Move," Nathan whispered, ushering Mara and Atlas to a dark corner as a black pickup truck rumbled to a stop. Out stepped two men dressed in civilian clothes, but their movements were too crisp, too rehearsed. One of them, a wiry man with a hawk nose and cold green eyes, lifted a walkie. "All clear. Transfer begins in 20 minutes. Nathan's pulse quickened. He recognized the man Davis Grant, a former DEA agent gone rogue. It confirmed what he feared. Sanctum had men in every agency. Atlas let out a low whimper, barely audible. But it was enough. The hawk-eyed man turned. "What was that?" Suddenly, the van engine roared. Mara had crawled into the cab and hit the ignition. Screams followed. One man lunged toward her, but Nathan tackled him from behind, slamming him against the crate. The second man drew a weapon, but Atlas flew at him, jaws clamping on his wrist, forcing the shot to go wild. Amid the chaos, sparks flew. One of the bullets had shattered a fuse box. Smoke billowed. Lights flickered. The room filled with the scent of burning wires. Mara shouted, "We have to go!" Atlas, now limping, dragged himself to the far wall and sniffed frantically, then pounced on a set of cables. With a sharp snap of his jaws, he bit down, severing the main transmission line. A red alarm began to blink weakly on a nearby panel. But it wasn't enough. The dense forest and the remote location would hide the signal. Then Atlas did something Nathan would never forget. The old shepherd turned, grabbed a torn scrap of Mara's jacket with his teeth, and bolted out the door into the night. Nathan shouted, "Atlas!" But the dog didn't look back. Through ferns and over logs, Atlas ran. Blood dotted the leaves behind him from his reopened wound, but he didn't stop. His ears flattened, breath ragged, legs trembling, but he ran. He ran like lives depended on it. Miles away, at the edge of Pine Hollow's northern ridge, a patrol unit was combing the forest for illegal hunters. At the head was Officer James Beckett, a square-jawed man in his 50s with a gravelly voice and a stubborn sense of duty. He was inspecting a broken trap when Atlas burst from the underbrush, startling the whole team. "Whoa! What the hell?" Beckett raised his rifle, then froze. "Wait, that's the dog from the poster, the one that saved the vet." Atlas limped forward, dropped the fabric at Beckett's boots, and collapsed. A young female officer knelt beside him. "He's bleeding bad, but he came to us on purpose. Look, this is from a woman's coat." Beckett's eyes narrowed. "Get the medic, and call it in. I think we just found the break we've been praying for." Back at the ranger station, Mara and Nathan had retreated into the underground corridor. It was lined with narrow bunk beds and storage compartments. Nathan found a satellite phone and tried calling, but the signal was blocked. Suddenly, a rustle came from behind a supply crate. Nathan raised his weapon, but it wasn't a smuggler. It was Eli. The teenage boy stepped into the weak light, eyes wide. His wiry frame was caked with grime, and he held a screwdriver like a dagger. He couldn't have been more than 15. "Don't shoot," he whispered. I'm not one of them. Mara stepped forward gently. You're the boy from the mill. Eli nodded, trembling. I've been hiding here since the raid. I thought they'd forget about me. He looked down. I've seen where they take people. I know names, faces, routes. I wrote it all down. I want to help. Nathan placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. You just did. They didn't know yet that Atlas had succeeded, but they knew, somehow, the tide had turned. The Iron Veil Bridge loomed ahead like a skeletal beast sprawled across the canyon, its rusted beams groaning under the weight of fog and memory. Nathan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale against the dark leather. Beside him, Mara checked her sidearm, her jaw tight. In the back seat, Atlas sat alert, ears twitching, the bandage around his flank already darkened with blood, but his eyes burning with resolve. They had tracked Hale's convoy through winding forest trails and intercepted radio chatter confirming his plan to smuggle out the remaining captives by freight truck over the abandoned railway bridge before authorities could close in. What Hale didn't know was that Atlas, limping and bloodied, had already reached the Rangers' outpost the night before, carrying Mara's torn sleeve in his mouth. The patrol team, led by Sergeant Lucero, a sharp-eyed, broad-shouldered woman with a frostbitten past in border enforcement, had moved fast. Now, as Nathan's cruiser crested the final turn before the bridge, static crackled in the radio. This is Ranger Team Bravo. Visual contact confirmed. We're 2 clicks west, flanking position. Awaiting go signal. Mara clicked the receiver. Stand by. Eyes on target. Wait for distraction. Ahead, the freight truck rumbled across the bridge's center, its weight shaking the rails. Haley sat behind the wheel, sunglasses glinting beneath a ball cap, unmoved by the fragile human cargo sealed inside the container behind him. A man with a thick beard likely Santoro, Hale's right hand sat in the passenger seat, scanning the rear through binoculars. Nathan reached beneath the dashboard and flipped the switch for infrared mode. 2 spotters on the north scaffolding, he muttered. Snipers. Atlas growled low. His tail stiffened, body leaning forward. Suddenly, the shepherd lunged. Before Nathan could stop him, Atlas bolted from the car, darting through brush and scaling the side embankment with staggering speed despite his wound. Nathan cursed, reaching for the door, but Mara held him back. Trust him. On the metal frame above the bridge, a flicker of movement betrayed the sniper's nest. The man shifted slightly, taking aim with cold precision. Nathan's world slowed. The glint of a scope, the tightening of a trigger finger, then Atlas struck. He lunged from below, colliding with the gunman's legs and sending both tumbling down the embankment in a blur of fur and steel. The shot fired wild, harmless, burying into distant bark. Nathan ducked, heart pounding. Now! Mara shouted. They moved, fast and sharp, crossing the bridge's lip just as Hale accelerated. But Atlas was already ahead. Blood streaked his coat, his gait uneven, but his jaws locked around Santoro's arm through the passenger window. The man screamed, elbowing the dog. The truck swerved. Metal screamed against metal as it jerked left, 2 wheels lifting slightly before slamming down. Nathan floored the accelerator and pulled parallel. Mara leapt from the cruiser's hood, landed on the running board, and shattered the passenger window with her elbow. "Hands up!" she roared. Santoro tried to reach for his weapon, but Atlas released his arm only to snap his jaws toward the man's wrist. The gun clattered uselessly to the floor. Hale slammed the brakes. The truck skidded, veering sideways, barely stopping before the bridge's final support. Dust swirled around them. From the trees on both ends of the bridge, boots thundered forward. Ranger Bravo flanking from the west, town deputies charging from the east. Among them, Grace emerged, winded but resolute, leading a group of townspeople with flashlights and improvised weapons. Nathan jumped onto the hood of the cruiser and raised his badge high. "Nobody fires unless fired upon. Hale, step out of the vehicle." The driver's side door opened. Hale exited, hands up, a twisted smile curling under his mustache. "I always knew you were too soft, Carter," he said. That badge blinded you." "No," Nathan replied, eyes fixed on the captive container behind the truck. "It showed me exactly where to look." Behind him, the patrol team swarmed the truck, breaking the locks. Dozens of faces stared out, frightened, bruised, but alive. One of them, a boy with hollow cheeks and blistered palms, looked up at Atlas and smiled. "Is that the dog that found us?" he whispered. Atlas, breathing hard, wagged his tail once and collapsed at Nathan's feet. Grace rushed forward, kneeling beside the shepherd, cradling his head gently. "He's okay," she said softly, glancing at Nathan. "He's a hero." Mara sat back against the railing, adrenaline draining from her. She turned her face toward the rising sun beyond the pines. The Iron Veil Bridge had once been a place of silence, a forgotten skeleton in the forest. Today it bore witness to something else entirely, a reckoning, a unity, a story that would echo far beyond the rusted rails. The morning light over Iron Veil was warmer than it had been in weeks. It stretched gently across the scorched metal of the old railway bridge, over the now-abandoned Sanctum trucks, and into the town square, where people had gathered not in fear, but in healing. The operation had ended the night before with the arrest of Hale and Briggs. Both men were led away in cuffs, bruised and bloodied, but breathing. The truck's back doors had swung open to reveal terrified migrants, young men, women, even children. Some in shock, others crying with relief. One little girl clung to the leg of Atlas, burying her face in his fur, whispering a wordless thanks. Atlas, though wounded, stood tall, his new scar across the shoulder a crimson line against his sable coat. Sheriff Nathan Cole had barely slept, but he didn't care. In the community center turned temporary safe house, he moved quietly among the survivors, checking names, providing blankets, offering calm words. Across the room, Mara sat with an elderly translator taking testimony. Her once pristine blazer was torn and smeared, hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, but her expression remained focused, calm. She glanced up when Nathan approached, her tired eyes meeting his with something softer than gratitude. "You staying long enough to breathe, Agent?" he asked, voice low. She smirked faintly. "Not Agent anymore. Just Mara, for now. I'm putting in to stay." Nathan blinked. "Stay? In Iron Veil?" She nodded. "This place? It needs someone who knows how to listen. And fight. I can be both." Nathan leaned against the doorway beside her. "We'd be lucky to have you." There was a quiet pause before she added, "Besides, I'm not done with this town. Or you." Before Nathan could answer, a loud burst of laughter drew their attention. It came from a group of children in the square, gathered around Atlas. The old German shepherd, now bandaged but proud, sat regally as they fussed over him. One of the kids, a bold, red-headed girl named June, pulled a red scarf from her backpack. It was frayed and faded, but lovingly folded. She tied it gently around Atlas's neck. "Now, you look like a real hero," she whispered. The crowd began to chant softly, then louder, "Guardian! Guardian of Iron Veil!" Atlas didn't bark. He didn't need to. He simply looked up at Nathan and Mara, eyes bright with something deeper than instinct, perhaps pride, perhaps purpose. The whole town gathered around as Sheriff Cole stood tall and raised his voice. "We owe our lives to courage, to unity, to the people who risked everything for what's right, and to one incredible dog." Applause erupted, and Atlas, tail thumping gently, basked in the attention. Nathan stepped forward and lifted a polished wooden plaque. Etched in its center were names of the rescued, followed by a single line beneath. "In honor of the Guardian of Iron Veil, who reminded us all that loyalty leaves no one behind." In the weeks that followed, Iron Veil changed. A new initiative bloomed, led by Nathan and Mara, bringing the FBI and local police together in a special joint task force stationed right in Iron Veil. The team set up base in the refurbished ranger station, once a hollow shell of trafficking, now a beacon of justice. The windows were cleaned, the graffiti scrubbed away. On the walls hung photographs. Eli smiling wide beside Atlas. The kids painting welcome signs in a dozen languages. Mara and Nathan shaking hands with former migrants now granted safety. Eli, the young boy who had once cowered in the shadows of the forest trucks, had been taken in by a kind couple from the neighboring town. Sarah and Blake Harris, mid-40s, both public school teachers, had longed for a child but were unable to conceive. Sarah, tall and willow-thin, wore long flowing skirts and always had dirt under her fingernails from gardening. Her kindness was the quiet kind. Warm smiles, gentle touches, and listening more than speaking. Blake, broad-shouldered and soft-spoken, carried Eli home in his arms as if he were made of porcelain. The boy still flinched at loud noises but had begun to sleep through the night. Mildred, the sharp-tongued widow who once ran the bakery on Main Street, now volunteered daily at the task force center, bringing trays of hot food to officers and civilians alike. She had lost a son to the opioid crisis years ago, something that had turned her cynical and withdrawn. But watching Atlas protect her town, seeing Eli's eyes light up at a warm bowl of stew, seemed to crack something open in her. Her gruff manner remained, but the cookies she baked were now always shaped like German shepherds. Meanwhile, Nathan launched a community outreach project, the Ironvale K9 program. Every Saturday morning, the precinct's back lot turned into a makeshift training ground. Children, teenagers, even veterans came with their dogs or borrowed ones from the shelter. Atlas, though retired from combat, served as the program's silent mascot, trotting between cones, barking softly when a kid got the sequence right, licking tears when someone stumbled. One of the veterans, Hank Redding, a stocky man in his 50s with a missing leg and a booming laugh, broke down after his first session. "Didn't think I could do anything useful anymore," he whispered to Nathan. "But that dog, he looked at me like I mattered." "You do," Nathan replied. "We all do. That's what Atlas reminds us." One quiet evening, as orange light bathed the Ironvale horizon, Nathan and Mara sat on the hood of his cruiser parked near the river bend. Atlas lay between them, his red scarf fluttering gently in the breeze. "So," Mara began, nudging him with her shoulder, "what now?" Nathan watched the fading sun, then looked down at Atlas. "Now, we stay ready. We keep fighting the good fight. And we teach the next generation that sometimes the strongest warriors wear fur." Mara smiled. "You're becoming a poet, Sheriff." He shrugged. "I just speak dog." They both laughed, and in that sound there was no pain, no fear, only the promise of something lasting. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with thunder or glory, but on 4 legs, with a wounded shoulder and a heart stronger than fear. Atlas, the brave German shepherd, was not just a dog. He was a guardian sent in the hour of deepest darkness, a symbol of faith, loyalty, and unshakable love. When the world closed its eyes to the cries of the lost, Atlas saw. When evil thought it had won, Atlas ran through bullets, through fire, through silence. His courage rewrote destinies. His instincts saved lives. And in his scars, we see not weakness, but grace. Whether you believe in divine intervention, fate, or simply the mysterious way life moves, Atlas reminds us that sometimes God's answer isn't a voice from heaven, but the bark of a dog who refuses to give up. In your life, you might not face traffickers or battles on bridges, but maybe you're tired. Maybe you're waiting for a sign. Let this story remind you. Miracles wear many shapes. Stay kind. Stay brave. And never overlook the silent guardians beside us, whether in fur or flesh. If this story touched your heart, please consider sharing it with someone who believes in second chances. Drop a comment below and tell us what you believe was the biggest miracle in this journey. And if your heart whispered amen while reading, let it echo by typing amen in the comments. Subscribe for more stories that shine light in the darkest corners, and may God bless you and your loved ones, especially those still waiting for a sign, a rescue, or a reason to believe again. Amen.